What's up YouTube, it's the one and only Legend of Winning, aka Low, and I'm back with another video. Now so far this season, 20 games in, I have definitely been thrown a couple of surprises and some fastballs that I definitely were not expecting. Shout out to the Detroit Pistons because they're playing fantastic. Shout out to my man Kyrie Irving, Brad Stevens, and everyone else with the Celtics. They're playing great as well. And for those out there who don't know, I hate both of those organizations, and yet I'm still able to, give the props to those organizations, especially since they've been playing really good so far this season. But then on the other spectrum, we have a team that I and many other people were expecting to be much better than what they are right now, and that is the Oklahoma City Thunder. And so far this season, the Thunder are a team that, for whatever reason, are just struggling in the areas that they really and truly should not be struggling in whatsoever. Right now, the Oklahoma City Thunder have a losing record, despite the fact that they are one of the best teams defensively in the NBA. Leading that stride are players such as Paul George, Steven Adams, and Andre Roberson. And then even other players such as Russell Westbrook, and I think a pretty good solid part of their bench is also really good on team defense. And yes, we're gonna gloss over the fact that Carmelo Anthony isn't the greatest defender, especially because he doesn't really have to be that great of a defender on a team that has a lot of defensive pieces. But offensively is where they are struggling. And again, it's very weird because they added two offensive talented pieces to their roster. Now, why is this so? Is for multiple reasons. For one, efficiently, this team is terrible, like really bad. For one, their big three, none of those players are on the high efficiency range, at least when it comes to their field goal percentage. Paul George is shooting over 40% from three, so that's really appealing. And then Carmelo Anthony is shooting over 35%, actually over 36% from behind the arc, so that's also pretty appealing as well. But the field goal percentages are atrocious. Russell Westbrook is hovering around 40% from the field and a pretty abysmal three-point percentage as well. And also that free throw percentage has been going up as of recently, but in the beginning of the season, Russell Westbrook just wasn't shooting efficient at any aspect of basketball. Also keep in mind that Russell Westbrook is almost turning the ball over 5 times a game, so yeah, that's also not looking too good for the overwhelming efficiency of this team. But the thing that's also really concerning about this roster is that we're talking about 3 players who last year, or at least the last 2 years actually, were consistently struggling to find the type of success, and many people pardon them because of the lack of talent that was surrounding them. Last year, Russell Westbrook went out there, won an MVP, averaged a triple-double, and despite the fact that many people, including myself, really questioned the validity of that triple-double and his MVP and how much praise that he should be getting, many people overlooked the lack of success from the team simply because he was playing with quote-unquote nobodies. However, this argument or this belief is completely debunked when you start to look at other players that he played with who are now playing on other organizations such as Victor Oladipo.
7. Here's a 3 by Oladipo. Oh, he hit it! Victor Oladipo from 3-point range! And the Pacers have a 1-point lead!
Who is having a fantastic season and actually is leading his team to a better record than Russell Westbrook is. Same thing can be said about Carmelo Anthony. Over the past couple of years, many people have pardoned the idea that Carmelo Anthony might have actually been a really bad player simply because he was playing on a team with not that much talent. Sure, Porzingis was on the roster for the past 2 years, and sure, he has a lot of potential and talent, but Porzingis just wasn't at that stage of his career yet. And also, I do keep in mind that players such as Joakim Noah, and we already know about Phil Jackson and the mess that he left in the organization, definitely made it much more harder for Carmelo Anthony to bring that team to the amount of success that a lot of people were constantly expecting out of it. But now we're at a point where Carmelo Anthony finally left the organization, removed his trade clause, and went to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the New York Knicks are doing just fine. Actually, they have a winning record, and Porzingis is a 30-point scorer. And so that does not favor the argument for Carmelo Anthony either. And what's even more frustrating, at least from my aspect, is that these are players that, again, many people gave them excuses, pardoned them for their lack of efficiency, for their lack of productivity, and their lack of success. And so you would assume players such as a Carmelo Anthony, especially Carmelo, because he's the one who waived his no trade clause to be put on this team particularly, you would believe that they would do any and everything in their power to make it easier for them to score and win more games.
No, hell no. No, not at all. I mean,
and yet we're talking about a team that is leading the NBA in isolation plays, a team that is towards the bottom in passes made on a night-to-night basis, and a team that is again struggling on a night-to-night basis to get open looks, as they are towards the bottom as a unit when it comes to their field goal percentage and their three-point percentage as well. And also, before we wrap this video up, I do want to point out the fact that Billy Donovan is just a terrible coach. It is amazing to me how poorly coached this team is. I mean, we're talking about a team that has had countless fourth quarter leads or countless second half leads, and they've consistently blown them away to certain teams that just do not deserve to win the game simply because there were lack of adjustments made from Billy Donovan. And also, I felt like this last year when I started to notice that his substitution patterns were very questionable. His lack of play calling, or at least his predictable play calling, was also very questionable and concerning as well. And this idea that he just doesn't hold players to a certain standard. Now, don't get me wrong, it definitely takes a particular coach to do so. Coaches such as Rick Carlisle, Greg Popovich, Phil Jackson, they are able to hold players to the same standards to other players despite their role or their label or whatever individual awards or statistical success that they have achieved throughout their career. Popovich will hold Tim Duncan to the same standard that he holds Kyle Anderson, to bring the success that is expected from Popovich amongst his teams. But I don't really think we can get that out of Billy Donovan simply because he's a young coach, or at least he doesn't have that much time in the NBA, and he just doesn't have that type of success. He was jumping from the collegiate level to the NBA level, and I think a lot of those players on the team just don't expect much out of him. But also, I do believe this to be very, very true. I think that Billy Donovan may be afraid to hold some of his players to that same standard, especially players such as Russell Westbrook, in fear that he possibly could lose his job. And so if that is true, I definitely understand why there is a inability to hold certain players to a level of responsibility despite their role on the team with the Oklahoma City Thunder. And if that's true, that goes beyond the head coach and Billy Donovan, and that goes with the general manager and the owners and the other decision makers with the team, which is something that could possibly be true because when you look at Russell Westbrook and the way that he's been playing with his organization over the course of his career, there's definitely been this feeling of lack of responsibility put upon Russell Westbrook's shoulder, despite the fact that he's made multiple mistakes and multiple fourth quarter performances and multiple playoff appearances with his organization. And so those are just my thoughts on it. Again, I want to be very clear when it comes to playing the blame game. I don't necessarily believe it's one entity, but I definitely believe there is certain players or certain personnel, regardless if it's a general manager or a head coach, that receives a bigger burden that needs to be carried on their shoulder. And in my opinion, I definitely see a lot of it that has to be carried on Billy Donovan, but honestly, I'm just looking at these players and the lack of adjustments is really, really concerning. And if anything, I just want to leave you all on this note. This is the reason why I personally do not view statistical achievements in such high regards. Don't get me wrong, averaging a certain amount of points, grabbing a certain amount of rebounds, and facilitating a certain amount of assists is very impressive, especially when we're considering certain players and also comparing them. But at the end of the day, the reason why you take the floor and compete against other players is to win the game. And that is something that is consistently lost when multiple people start to have conversations about all-time great players. There have been many players throughout NBA history who have had to make adjustments and sacrifice their numbers just to put their organizations in better winning situations. And in my opinion, that is something that more people should be praising players for rather than averaging a triple-double, consistently averaging 20 points, or keeping their starting role. So when it comes to Carmelo Anthony, Paul George, and Russell Westbrook, my question to them is, what are they willing to sacrifice? Because if the whole purpose of bringing this big three together is to win games, and you're not willing to sacrifice, well, then we might as well just break this whole thing up. But that is my thoughts on this. Please let me know what you think about the organization as a whole, regardless of its players, the head coach, or even the general manager, because personally I do believe that there's multiple people here that have to burden the blame when it comes to the early struggles of the Oklahoma City Thunder. And with that being said, people, I'll see you all next time. Peace.